of the Knitting Circle, and I want to welcome you to today's live event. For this video today, we're going to be making something really fun. I've been wanting to knit a pillow for so long, and I finally did it. And so today we're going to be making the Seaside Summer Pillow. So this pillow we're making to go around an 18-inch square pillow insert, but I'll talk a little bit about how you can adjust this for any size pillow that you might happen to have. So before we get started, let's talk a little bit about the pattern and how the video is going to go today. So if you haven't done so already, there is a link in the description for the video on so that you're able to download the pattern. So be sure to do that so you can follow along while I'm working through it today, and then you'll have the pattern to knit one for yourself later. In addition to that, you're also going to notice a chat box wherever you're watching. So be sure to drop any of your comments or questions in that chat box. While I'm working through it, we'll try to get to as many questions as we can along the way. I also love to know where you're watching from, maybe how long you've been knitting. I also like to know what you like to knit, maybe what you're knitting while you're watching this. That also helps me give me an idea of what I should do for future projects as well. So welcome to everybody. I can't wait to answer all your questions about the pillow along the way and show you all the steps. This is a really easy pattern. It's one, I wouldn't necessarily say it's completely beginner friendly. I wouldn't say that this is a great first knitting project, but it is sort of for the adventurous beginner. I'll show you all the steps that you need to know, and then you can always come back and watch this video later if you need to review any of the specific steps that were a little bit confusing to you. So let's go ahead and get started and start talking about the materials. So for this particular pillow, we're using a bulky weight yarn. I just have little balls of bulky weight yarn here, but you're going to need 3 colors of a bulky weight yarn. You're going to need 300 yards of your main color, your color A. I had used this light blue, which is why I don't have a lot of it left. And then you'll need 2 more colors for your colors B and C. So this is one of those projects that's really perfect for you know, looking at the decor in your house, the color scheme in your house, or whoever you're making this for, and really trying to match it to your style. So again, you'll need 400 yards total, 300 yards of the main color, and then 50 yards of your accent colors. In addition to that, you just need, you know, the usual suspects, knitting needles. You're going to need a circular needle. Here I just have 16-inch circular needle. But for the actual project, you're going to need a US size 10, 6mm, 32-inch circular needle. And that's because we are going to be knitting this in the round. And so, and because we have an 18-inch insert for our pillow, 18 times 2 is 36. So a 32-inch circular needle is what you're going to want to use here. I see Violet saying hello from Columbia. Hi, Violet. I'm so glad that you're here. In addition to the knitting needles and the yarn, you know, it's just the usual things. You're going to need a stitch marker to mark the beginning of your round because we're going to be knitting in the round. You'll need scissors. You'll need a tapestry needle. We are going to be doing mattress stitch at the end of the pillow. I have a couple here. You're just going to want to make sure that you have one that the eye of your tapestry or yarn needle is large enough that your bulky yarn can get through it. And then also because we are going to be seaming with it, you don't want it to be too fat. I brought out 2 here. Most likely I'll use the smaller one because that's what I prefer for seaming. But you use the tapestry needle that's right for you. We also are going to be doing a 3-needle bind off. So you're going to need an extra knitting needle. So you could just grab an extra knitting needle that's about the same size as your main needle that you used for the project. Here I have a double pointed needle. You could grab another circular needle, a straight needle. It doesn't matter. You just need an extra needle for that 3-needle bind off, because obviously for a 3-needle bind off, we need 3 needles. And then of course you're going to need your pillow insert. I did not have an extra one. I'll just bring this back in. I don't think it quite all fits in the frame, but again, this is an 18-inch pillow insert. I just ordered mine online, but you can find them at the craft store. I've even heard about people purchasing really cheap throw pillows at some stores. And if the cover for the pillow has a zipper on it, you can actually just take the pillow out of it. And sometimes that's actually cheaper than buying just a plain insert. I've just heard about people doing that in the past. So something to consider. And again, if you don't like this size of pillow, we're going to talk about how to adjust for whatever size pillow you have. We have a few more people saying hello. We have Lucy from South Carolina, Patricia from the UK, and MK from Canada. So we have people watching from all over. That's so great. So one thing you're going to want to keep in mind with this project is that gauge is actually important. I know that in a lot of these projects that I do here on the Knitting Circle, you know, we're doing hats, and yes, a hat, you can always find somebody where, you know, the hat is going to fit them. Or, you know, other items where the gauge isn't so important. With this particular one, if you are trying to put your pillow cover on that 18-inch pillow, you're going to need to make sure that you're matching the gauge that I get. Obviously, there's a little bit of wiggle room here. It might be a little too loose, a little too tight on your pillow. But this is one where gauge is pretty important. So you're just going to want to make sure that you're checking your gauge to make sure that you know, it's matching or it's really, really close. And the gauge for this is just listed in stockinette stitch in the round. And so you're just going to want to make sure you check that. The gauge works out to 3.25 stitches per inch or 5.5 rounds per inch. So that's the stitches per inch and the rounds per inch. The stitches per inch to me really is probably the most important. Just because that's what's going to go around the pillow. Let me pull my pillow back in here. So your gauge for your stitches per inch, that'll be what's going around the pillow. And then your rounds are for the up and down. And, you know, you can always fudge it a little bit if your gauge is off at the end and add a few more rounds. But you're going to want to make sure that your pillow cover is going to fit nice on your pillow. So just something to keep in mind. I know normally we like to do projects where gauge isn't so important, but this one you want to make sure that you're pretty close. Okay, so now that we've talked about all those things, let's go ahead and start by casting on. And we have, let's see, we have Linda from Texas. Oh, pretty pillow. Thank you, Linda. Andrea from Michigan and Sally from Michigan also. Awesome. You guys are all knitting. Please let me know what you're making today. So to start this pillow, what we're going to do is cast on 120 stitches. But if you want a different pillow size, this stitch pattern that I did on this pillow, you just need an even number of stitches. So you can take the gauge information. Like I said, it's 3.25 stitches per inch. So if you have a different size pillow, you can use that information to figure out an even number of stitches to cast on. But the 18-inch pillow, I think, is a nice throw pillow size, and that's going to be 120 stitches. So as usual, I like to start with a long tail cast on, and I show this just about in every video. And let's see, we have Ellen here from Tucson. Oh, first time here. Hello. Well, I show this in just about every video. So I'm glad you're here so I can show you, because I'm always not sure if people have just seen this 100 times and they don't want to see it again, but we always have new viewers. So when I'm doing a long tail cast on, I like to start by estimating how long my tail needs to be. And in this particular case, it is kind of nice because for the actual pattern, I'm going to be doing a smaller swatch here, but for the actual pattern, you're going to be casting on 120 stitches. So I'm going to start by wrapping the yarn around the needle 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I pull it off like this and I say, okay, that's about 10 stitches for my long tail cast on. Fold it over for 20, 30, 40, so on and so forth. So you would keep folding it over till you got to your 120. And then because 120 is kind of a lot of stitches, I then would just put a little extra in just to be on the safe side. And if you're good on your yarn requirements and you know you have extra, then just throw a little extra into the tail. The other thing too is with this, we are going to seam the cast on edge at the end. And when I was making the pillow, I did not start with a super long tail. Actually, I thought maybe I was going to put a zipper in, and honestly, I chickened out. So I ended up seaming it, and I just attached a new piece of yarn to seam it. But that's something to keep in mind, that we are going to be seaming the cast on edge at the end. So if you don't want to have to attach a new piece of yarn at the end when it's time to seam, then just leave a whole bunch of tail for that at the end. And you could always wind it around a little bread tie, or, there's little bobbin holders or things, or whatever or just let it hang for your tail, just to keep that in mind too. But I'll just likely attach a new piece of yarn here for our seaming anyway. So I've started with my slip knot, and then I'm just going to go ahead and start with that long tail cast on. If you need a review of the long tail cast on, we do have a video here on the Knitting Circle, a free one that you can watch, or you can, again, always come back and watch this video again to see exactly how to do it. And really for this, you can use whatever cast on you like. If you don't like the long tail cast on, don't use it. It's really whatever you like. Let me see. We have Anne from Florida. Hello, Anne. Glad you're here. So you would just keep casting on until you get to your 120 stitches. And so at that point, on your 32-inch circular, you're going to have your stitches will pretty much be going all the way around at that point. So they should be pretty much meeting all the way back to the start of your needle. And then we're going to join in the round. And so when I'm joining in the round, sometimes you can get that little bit of a gap, just naturally from just starting your knitting. So what I like to do is this little hack that I learned, and it really helps keep that join nice and tight. So after you have your 120 stitches, and this is only if you want to, this is not in the pattern, this is just my little tip for getting a nice join. You're going to cast on one extra stitch. So in this case, you would have 121 stitches. We're going to then check and double check and maybe triple check that we're not going to put a twist in our knitting, right? Because we're not making some kind of Mobius today. So I usually have my cast on edge go towards the middle here. So I'm making sure you don't want it twisting here. If you see a twist like this, you're going to have a problem, because then you're going to put a twist into your knitting. And, after about one round, you're not going to be able to get that back out. So we're going to double check. Yes, our cast on's all going to the middle, so we're not going to twist it. And then we cast on one extra stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide one stitch from the left needle to the right needle. And then I'm going to take that extra stitch that I cast on and pass it over that stitch. So we essentially just bound it off. You can see right there, that's the stitch we bound off. Now it's a little bit loose because that's the one we had just added. So we can just tighten the tails a little bit here in our yarn. And now we have this nice, neat join. And it just makes it a little bit tighter there. You don't get that weird gap. I mean, the gap does go away, but I find just also it makes it a little bit neater when you're going to weave in your end later if you do that. So I'm pretty much doing this all the time now when I'm knitting in the round. So you should definitely try it on this pillow. So, we have people working on some projects while they are watching our video today. Linda is working on a child's blanket for my son's friend. That's awesome. Linda's tatting a doily and getting ready to quilt a quilt. That's awesome. Two things I don't know how to do and want to know how to do. I would love to learn tatting, and I'm a very, very beginner quilter. Sally is doing a comfort cloak for the senior center. That's awesome. Violet's knitting a sweater. Oh, that's so great. I love that everybody's knitting along. I love to knit and watch videos like this too. So I'm glad that you're here and you're knitting while you're watching. So once we have joined in the round, I'm going to go ahead and place my stitch marker. And now we're ready to begin the pattern. And I didn't say this at the beginning, and I probably should have, is we're starting with color A, our main color. So that would be the one where you have the 300 yards total. And then once you have joined in the round, now we're ready to just start the pattern. So the first part of this is really easy. We're just going to knit for 10 rounds. So when working stockinette stitch in the round, you're just knitting every round because we're always on the right side of the work. And so it makes it nice and easy. And that's really what I wanted for this pillow. I really wanted just something simple that just had a little bit of detail, but it was mostly easy knitting. I looked at so many different stitch patterns when I was trying to decide what to do. And actually both of the little details in colors B and C, I have used those little stitch patterns in other patterns I've designed over the years. And I just love them so much that I couldn't pass up the opportunity to use them again because I just think they look so cool. Let's see. Annie from England is knitting brioche for the first time. That's awesome. Brioche is so beautiful. That's something I've done a little bit, but not a lot of brioche, but that's something I definitely want to do more of. And maybe we should, maybe I should do another pattern, or maybe I should do a pattern for one of these live events in brioche. That would be really fun. And Ellen is knitting Afghan squares from quilt designs. Oh, that's cool. What a good idea. So we're just going to keep knitting around, and you would just continue to do this for the 10 rounds. So I'm going to go ahead and just knit one more round here, and then we will, I'll start the next color, or the color B. So again, when you're making this, you just need to have an even number of stitches. And so you can put this in any size pillow. Even if you wanted to do something like a rectangular pillow, you would just have to think a little bit about how many rounds you were going to do in order for, you know, because it would be shorter going up probably. So you just would want to keep that in mind. But again, this would really work for just about any pillow you want that was either square or rectangle. You want to put this on a circular pillow, that's going to take a lot more planning. One thing I would like to know while I'm just knitting this next round is what kind of projects would you like to see here demonstrated on these lives? You know, we typically try to do things that are, you know, a little bit on the not necessarily simpler side, but smaller, you know, so that they're easy to show you in the specified amount of time. But I always love to know what people want to see, or even if there's techniques you want to learn that I can incorporate into some of these projects. It always helps me decide on what project I'm going to design next. All right, so we're about halfway through this round. And again, the first part of this is you're going to knit 10 rounds in color A. And now when we switch to color B, our color B, we're only doing for 2 rounds. So what I did with this particular pattern, and this is one of those things that I'm going to say it's really personal preference as far as what you want to do. I carried my color A up the inside of the pillow, and then my colors B and C, I actually would just add them for their 2 or 3 rows, depending on which little pattern we're on. And then I would cut the yarn. And then I had to weave in all those ends at the end. But I felt like because my color A was so light, I was worried if I carried up my colors B and C that you'd be able to see it through the fabric. So as I'm coming to the end here, I'm going to pull the pillow back out and show you what I mean here. Okay, so we just got one more stitch. Okay, we'll just leave it like that. Let me pull the pillow out. So again, so we're starting here. Let's see, which way does this go? That's the bottom. Okay, it goes this way. So again, we started at the bottom here and then knit, and then we're going to be starting our color B here just for these little 2 rows. That's just 2 rows right here. And then we're going back to color A, and then we're going to go to color C. And so again, what I was saying is when I was doing these little stripes, I'm going to attach the yarn, and then after my rows or rounds, I guess, are done, I'm going to cut the yarn and weave in the end, because again, my main color is pretty light, and I did not want to be able to see wherever the beginning of my round was. I think it was maybe this side. I didn't want to be able to see that yarn being carried up along here. I thought it might show through. So it was a little bit more work to weave in those ends, but I think it makes a nicer finished product. Okay, so after you've knit your 10 rounds of color A, we're going to switch to your color B. And so I used this kind of dusty blue here for my bluish gray for my color B. And we're just going to go ahead and get started with that. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to just leave my color A hanging out because again, I'm going to carry that up the side because we're using it so much. But for color B, all I'm doing is folding it over like this, basically making a loop like this. So I can just stick my needle into the next stitch, stick the loop on, pull it through, and then that would be my first stitch. So for our color B, this will be rounds 11 and 12. And we are going to be increasing here. So with this particular stitch pattern, and what I really love about it is it kind of makes these little mini bobbles. I don't know if that's what they're officially called, but that's what I'm calling them. So they make these little tiny little bobbles. It adds some nice texture to the pillow. Actually, all these stripes do. And so for this one here that we're doing in our color B, we're going to be doubling the number of stitches on round 11 and then decreasing them back down on round 12. So we had 120 stitches. And so this round 11, we're going to be increasing to 240 stitches. And then on round 12, we'll decrease back down to the 120. So I hope that makes sense. I know the math sometimes, can get a little bit confusing. Let's see. Linda's been knitting for about 72 years off and on. That's awesome. I love that. Okay, so now we're going to start with round 11. So we already started with the knit one. So for round 11, we're going to knit one, yarn over, knit one into the next stitch, which is what I'm going to do here. So we're taking one stitch and turning it into 3. And then the next stitch, we're going to slip one purlwise with the yarn in back. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So we've done our knit one, yarn over, knit one, and then slip one with yarn in back, just like that. And we just keep repeating that all the way around. So into our next stitch, knit one, we're going to leave the stitch on the left needle, yarn over, knit one, slip one with yarn in back. Let's see what's happening there. You can see we're making these little, almost like little cluster of 3 stitches here, and then we're slipping. And this is a really easy way to read your knitting because on round 11, you're going to want to have 3 stitches in your color B, and then you're just slipping your color A. So it will be pretty easy to tell if you've made a mistake. So let's just keep working all the way around. Knit one, yarn over, knit one into the next stitch, slip one purlwise with yarn in back. I'll just keep doing that all the way around. Ellen's been knitting for 60 years and it keeps Ellen sane. That's awesome. Keeps me sane too. People are always saying, oh, I don't have the patience to knit. I'm like, no, I'm impatient. The knitting helps me just a little bit. Like I'm impatient when I'm waiting in line, but if I have my knitting, then I'm a little less impatient. Okay, so we're just going to keep repeating that all the way around. Knit one, yarn over, knit one, slip one with yarn in back. And you can do this maneuver however feels comfortable for you. I have a tendency to sort of bring my needles out like this when I'm doing the knit one, yarn over, knit one, but you'll find the way that works for you. You know, depending on how you hold your yarn, how you hold your knitting needles. I find everybody knits a little bit different. So, but I kind of tend to open that stitch up quite a bit, if that makes sense. So now I know I'm working into this stitch here and I've kind of pulled it a little. You don't want to pull it so much that you break your yarn or anything, but I kind of give it a little tug to open it up a little bit to make it a little bit easier to work into. And so we're just coming around here. Oops, split the yarn there. The particular yarn that I'm using here is a 100% wool yarn. And like I was saying earlier, is I did seam this pillow at the end. I will be totally honest. I was going to put a zipper in this thing, and I'm not great at sewing, and I completely chickened out. I had even gone so far as to message with Brenda KB Anderson, who is the managing editor of the Creative Crochet Corner. And she knows a lot about sewing, and she's very, 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 very talented and knows how to do all the complicated things. And she gave me all this advice on sewing a zipper onto this thing, and I still chickened out. But if you know how to put a zipper on, or you feel comfortable with it, you can go ahead and do that. I just went ahead and seamed it at the end, which means obviously the pillow cover is staying with the pillow, but you know, you can do what you like. And it wasn't, I guess that I chickened out is maybe not the right way to say it, is I started to sew the zipper in, and I did not like how it looked. So I just decided to do a mattress stitch at the end, but you can just sew a zipper on if you want to take your pillow cover on and off. So even the experts chicken out sometimes. Barbara's favorite thing to knit is fingerless mitts. That's awesome. I love knitting fingerless mitts, and that is something that I definitely plan on bringing showing in one of these lives in the future. Definitely, probably as we get closer to fall here in the US where I'm located, we'll probably do some fingerless mitts on one of these lives, because I love making them too. That's up there. Fingerless mitts are up there as one of my favorite things to knit. Linda's favorite thing to knit is hand knitting scarves and machine knitting sweaters. Cool. Okay, so we're coming to the end of round 11, and it's going to end with a slip one with yarn in back, and then we'll slip our marker. And this, you can see here, the stitch here is a little bit loose because that was the last stitch that we did with color A. So it's just because the working yarn here is just hanging down. We're going to slip our stitch marker, and we're ready to do round 12 in color B. And since I'm only going 2 rounds in the other color, I don't worry about twisting the yarn to carry it up. I'll just pick up color A again when I get to the end of this next round, round 12. So for round 12, we're going to have our yarn in front, because we're going to be purling. And so for round 12, we're going to purl 3 together and then slip 1 with yarn in front. Once again, our slips are purlwise in this entire pattern. Any slip stitches we do are worked purlwise. So for the purl 3 together, the 3 stitches we're purling together are these 3 stitches that we created by that knit 1, yarn over, knit 1. So again, this makes it really easy to read your knitting, because you know the purl 3 together is happening on those 3 stitches. So to purl 3 together, we're just going to go into the next 3 stitches like we're going to purl. And this you might find is a little bit tight. This is probably the slowest round on the pillow, but you only have to do this round 3 times total on the whole pillow. So it's not, well, maybe 4, but it's not that bad. So we're going to purl 3 together. And that's what kind of makes that little mini bobble, because we've brought all those stitches together. And then we're going to slip 1 with yarn in front. So we just leave the yarn where it is, and then it'll come in front of the stitch here. And then we're going to purl 3 together again. And again, this is a little bit tight, especially on these wood needles. I knit the actual pillow on a metal needle, and that with really pointy tips. And I found that was a little bit better for this. So that's something to keep in mind too. If you are also struggling a little bit with the purl 3 together, just keep in mind that maybe a different needle will help you. Again, like I said, for the actual pillow, I had used a metal needle. And the tips are a lot sharper on those. And so it was easier to get into these purl 3 togethers. But again, this round, it's just a few rounds on the whole entire pillow. So, and then we're just going to go back to knitting. So you just keep doing that all the way around. I'm not going to sit here and have you watch me struggle with my wood needles and my sticky wool yarn while I'm purling 3 together, but you get the idea. We're just going to purl 3 together here, and then slip 1 with yarn in front. And again, if you can see here, where we slip one with yarn in front, we're bringing that color B in front of our main color. And that's what makes the, what makes those little mini baubles. So that was this, we just did the first one. So it was this one down here, but all of these in the darker blue, those are all those rounds. So after you do that, you're just going to go back to knitting with your color A. So you'll just cut your color B and then go back to knitting. So just knitting every stitch. And then at that point, you will work 10 more rounds of knitting, and then you are going to bring in color C, and that'll be on round 23. So here's my color C, and then I have another little bit of knitting here, so we can just show you how to do it on this one. And this one fortunately, the stitch count is staying the same. There's no doubling the stitches. There's nothing like that. We're just going to be doing some purling and slipping, and that's it. So it's nice and easy. So for round number 23, again, I'm just dropping at this point, you'll have color A because you'll have just done 10 rounds. So you'll drop that, and then we will pick up color C and start with that. I don't have a stitch marker on this one. Let's add one, huh? Okay, there's the beginning of our round. So we're dropping color A. We've picked up color C now, and we're going to start with the purl. So again, when I'm attaching a new color, oops. With this one, when I'm doing a purl, I mean, it's easy to get your tail to the back, but I do like to try to keep my tail in the back from the beginning. So I just put my tail in the back, and then now I've come to the front with the yarn to purl. So round 23 is purl one, slip one with yarn in front. So you just keep doing purl one, slip with the yarn in front, purl one, slip with yarn in front. Again, the slips are purlwise. So purlwise just means you're inserting your needle as if you're going to purl, and then slip and purl and slip, just like that. So really you're only working every other stitch and then just slipping every other stitch. Sharon says, baby blankets are my fave. I've knit a lot of baby blankets over the years, Sharon. Most of my friends and family are out of their having babies phase, but yes, there was a time where I was making a whole lot of baby blankets, and love to do it. I love to both knit and crochet baby blankets, actually. We do have on our free patterns free patterns page on the Knitting Circle website. There is, I know, at least one baby blanket pattern there. There might be two, but there's definitely one. So I'm just going to continue this round by doing my purl one, slip one with yarn in front. And if you joined us late, I just want to remind you that you can download the pattern for the pillow today, and that is in the description for where you're watching the video. And if you have any questions about what I'm doing, be sure to just drop those in the comment chat box as well. So we're finishing up round 23. Oops, I dropped a stitch there. Okay, well here, so I dropped a stitch, and I know because I have my little strand hanging out down there. So I'm just gonna put that strand back on the needle and then bring it over just to fix it just like that. And I still need to work that stitch. There we go. For me, this is where I'm most likely to drop stitches when I'm slipping stitches. That's usually if I'm going to drop stitches on my project, it's while I'm doing slip stitches. Okay, so we come to the end of round 23, and it ends with the slip one with yarn in front. So we've done that. Now we slip the stitch marker, and we're ready to start round 24. Now, round 24 starts with a slip one with yarn in front. So we ended round 23 with the slip one, and we're going to start round 24 with the slip one. So we're going to slip and then purl. So you are going to have two slip stitches together right here, but it's very unnoticed. It's not noticeable at all. Well, I mean, it probably is. If somebody's really looking at your knitting, they'll probably notice that you slipped two stitches here. What I'm trying to say is this ends up being on the side of your pillow. And so this, you don't end up noticing that there's the two slip stitches there where we've gone on to the next round. So then for round 24, it's slip one with yarn in front and then purl. So we've just reversed what we just did. So basically now we have, it's a little, I know my colors are a little similar here, but on round 24, your purl stitch is going to be in your color A because you had slipped it before. And then your slipping on round 24 is the one in your new color. So that's another way to read your knitting. Because again, just like dropping stitches when I'm doing slip stitches, when I'm doing something like this, when I'm alternating, like I'm just doing purl, slip, purl, slip, purl, slip, I do have a tendency to get into autopilot and I end up slipping 2 stitches next to each other or purling 2 stitches next to each other. You know, and then I get to the end of the round and I'm like, wait, I'm not ending on the right thing. So I do like to point out different ways that you can read your knitting, because really that's what helps me when I'm working these types of patterns too. That's not to say I still see I was about to purl it and I needed to slip it. You know, obviously we all make mistakes, but being able to read your knitting is something that's a really great thing to learn how to do. And just as you knit more, you learn how to read your knitting, I think, better. Yeah, see, I think I purled 2 there, but we're just gonna keep going. Okay, so then once you finish round 24, which we're almost to the end of this round, we are going to work round 25, and round 25 is exactly the same as round 23. So you are just going back to purl 1, slip 1. So basically round 23 is purl 1, slip 1 all the way around. And then round 24 is slip 1, purl 1 all the way around. And then round 25, you go back to purl 1, slip 1. Okay, so we're coming to the end of this round. And then at this point, you would just keep going around one more time, working that round 23 again. But I'm going to go ahead and just stop here since that's a pretty easy step. I don't think we need to go over that one again. So now I'm just taking my color C yarn and I'm just going to put it to the inside so that I can weave that end in later. And then you're just going to go back to knitting. And then we're just going to knit for 10 more rounds. So basically what happens is the entire pillow is based on these 25 rounds. You do rounds 1 through 10 are knitting, just knitting every round because we're working stockinette stitch. And then rounds 11 and 12, we're doing with the color B, and that's where we increased with that knit 1 yarn over knit 1 on round 11, and then decreased it back down with that purl 3 together on round 12. And then we're going to knit 10 more rounds for rounds 13 to 22. So more stockinette stitch. Then rounds 23 through 25 are going to be with your color C, where we're doing this purl 1, slip 1, you know, just changing the orders of them. And then you just are going to keep repeating those 25 rounds. So for the 18-inch pillow, you will be doing rounds 1 through 25. Let me just look it up here on my little sheet here. We're going to be doing rounds 1 through 25, a total of 3 times. And then you'll do rounds 1 through 22 once more. And so that's all there is to the repeat. So really most of this pillow is just knitting, which I honestly kind of love. Let's see. Oh, Linda has a question, and Linda says, how well does a knitted pillowcase wear? You said you were using wool, so maybe it will last longer without signs of wear. That's a really great question. So I think that you just need to think about what exactly you're going to be doing with this pillow. If people are really going to be like using it to, like, you know, support their back or lean on it or put their head on it, you know, you are going to want to use something that's going to be a little bit sturdier. I do think wool's a pretty, you know, hardy yarn, I guess. You would want to avoid something that's going to like naturally pill. You know, sometimes acrylic, depending on the type of acrylic, can get really pilly. You know, and even some wools can too. But I do really like the wool for this. I find that it stands up really well. You know, to the wear and tear. Obviously, you know, if you have a pet that likes to, you know, if your pet enjoys, you know, playing with your yarn, especially your wool yarn, you know, maybe avoid that particular type of yarn for your pillow. But I do like the wool here. I think a superwash wool would also be really nice as well. And again, if it is something where you're going to want to take the pillow cover off and wash it, I mean, you can get the seam out of it if you're determined. And I'll show you how to do the mattress stitch here in just a minute. But if that's something to keep in mind too. If you are going to go with like a more delicate yarn, if you know, want to have something with a little halo to it, you know, like an Angora or a mohair, that might actually be really interesting, especially on the stockinette part. You know, you do want to keep in mind that that's not going to hold up as well. And you may want to, you know, be able to take that pillow cover off. And so you might want to, you know, sew in that zipper. If you do want to know more about sewing in a zipper, I would direct you to the Creative Crochet Corner. I know I was talking about Brenda, the managing editor over there. She did a bag recently, and I believe it's called like the Bonita Granny Square bag. And it's crochet, but even if you don't crochet, you should just go watch it because Brenda's awesome and she's fun to watch. But also in that video, she talks about sewing a zipper onto your fabric, and it would work for the crochet in the exact same, you know, in the similar way that it would to knitting, where you're just stitching the zipper in. So I'm just going to do one more round here just to get a little bit away from our color C. And then we will talk about our 3-needle bind off. So as I'm coming to the end here for our 3-needle bind off, we're going to have to basically turn our pillow inside out. So, or our pillow cover, I should say. Because we've been knitting in the round this entire time, we've been on the right side of our work. But I want to do the 3-needle bind off so that the bind off is going basically to the inside of the pillow. And the reason for that is, and you won't be able to see it on my pillow, but let's see, there we go. I wanted this bind off to be nice and smooth. As we're doing the 3-needle bind off, you'll see that you get what looks like a traditional bind off edge with the V's, and you'll see that when I demo it in just a second. But I wanted the outside to sort of just have this, you know, it almost looks like you did a Kitchener stitch or something at the top, which is also an option. If you like Kitchener stitch a lot, you could do that at the end of your pillow too, but I did not want to Kitchener stitch 120 stitches total together. So I just think 3-needle bind off here is just a little bit easier, and you get not the exact same look, but you know, pretty similar. So let's do that 3-needle bind off. So I've turned my work inside out, and in the pattern, I tell you that you can split the stitches in half. So you have 60 on each side, because as we're binding off, our cord's going to start to come sort of out like this. So you can count ahead of time to make sure you have 60 on each side. But if you have the right stitch count, things will just naturally work themselves out as we go along. Okay, so I'm just going to get myself situated here with all my yarns, and then I'm going to grab my 3rd needle for our 3-needle bind off. To do a 3-needle bind off, this is one of those things that's a little bit fiddly, but once you get it down, it's really not that hard. We're going to go into this. So we have our front needle and our back needle and our 3rd needle. We're going to go into the first stitch and then into the 2nd stitch in the back. So we went through the front stitch as if to knit, through the back stitch as if to knit, and basically we're knitting them. We are knitting them together. We're knitting those 2 stitches together and taking those 2 off the needle. So we have 1 stitch on our 3rd needle. We're going to do that again. Into the first front needle as if to knit, into the back needle as if to knit, wrap the yarn around to knit those 2 stitches together, and then take those off. Then you need to use one of these needles to pass the first stitch over the second. And that's your 3-needle bind off. Now, Linda's asking a very good question. How do you do a 3-needle bind off with the pillow inside? So at this point, we do not have the pillow inside. When we're doing the 3-needle bind off, this is still going to be open down here, and we're going to just 3-needle bind off the top. Then we're going to put the pillow in and seam it up at the end, or put a zipper in if you're adventurous. So again, going into each one, knitting them together, passing the first over the second, just like that. Front needle as if to knit, back needle as if to knit. Knit those together. And you can see I'm kind of using my finger to push the stitches off. You'll find your own, like everything, you'll find your own rhythm for what works for you with this. Again, this is probably one of the slower parts of making this pillow. And pass the first over the second. So yes, at this point, what we'll be left with at this point is a pillow cover that has an opening at the bottom, and the bottom, which is our cast on edge, is where we're going to seam it all closed. So you can see now the stitches are starting to stretch out on the needle. So I'm just going to kind of force the cord out here, and we can always rearrange it if we didn't get them perfectly split in half there. So we'll just continue with our 3-needle bind off. I tend to use the back needle for when I'm passing the first stitch over the second, but again, whatever works for you. I don't know why. I think maybe in my mind, that's just closer to the 3rd needle, but you can use either one to pass that first stitch over the second. Got a few more stitches to go here. And while I'm binding off, I'll just remind everybody that if you do decide to make the pillow, I really would like to see it. So be sure, if you make it, if you're on social media, be sure to tag us. We're on Facebook. We have a Knitting Circle Facebook group. We also are on Instagram where you can share it. And we are even on TikTok. So if you like the TikTok, be sure to check us out there too. Yeah, tag us and let us see your projects. And the other thing too is we actually have a project gallery page on our website, and you should go there anyway, even if you don't want to share your work. And knitters can go and share what they're working on and post a photo. And we do occasionally share those photos on social media. But I also like to just go there and look and see what everybody's making. So if you make the pillow, I would love if you posted it there. Or if you tag us on social media, that'd be great too. I'm just coming to the end here. With this 3rd needle, you do, I mean, here on my little swatch, these needles are pretty different sizes, but you're going to want to make sure your 3rd needle is pretty close in size to the needle you've used for the entire project, because this 3rd needle is what's determining the size of the actual stitch. And so you don't want to use something that's way too big or way too small, because it's going to either make your cast on way too tight or way too loose. So you want to make sure if you have the same size needle as the 3rd needle, that's best. But otherwise, if you go up or down by one size, that's probably fine too. But just don't use a size 10 for your project and then, grab the size 3 to do your 3-needle bind off. Okay, yeah, and you can see here, when I split the stitches up, now I only have one left over here. So how many stitches do we have left? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we need 6 on each side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're just going to rearrange our stitches here. I'm just kind of pinching everything together so I don't lose any stitches. And Annie says, always learning something new from Knitting Circle tutorials. 3-needle cast off. Who knew? Yes, this is a really great one. This is one, I know some people, I personally would not use this one for the bottom or the toe of a sock. But I know that there are people that if they really do not like using Kitchener stitch and they've knit a cuff down or top down sock, that they will sometimes use this to finish off their toe. I personally don't like it because you are making like a kind of a seam here. So I feel like I would feel that in my shoe and it would bother me. But yeah, this has lots of great uses. You can use it for all sorts of things. I've made sweaters that were worked in pieces and used this when, seaming pieces together at the shoulder. Okay, so we have one stitch now left on each needle. So we just need to go into the front, go into the back one, pull them through, and then we just have to take this over. There you go. The first one over the second one, and we're done. Okay, so we've managed to get through the 3 needle bind off. That wasn't too bad, I don't think. And we do have, I don't know if I said this already, we do have a full tutorial for that one on the knitting circle as well. Or again, you can come back and watch this video. It's going to pull that through. And so that would be our top edge. So you see if I turn it inside out, look how nice that looks. I think that little detail, it does make it look nice and finished, I think. Like, I don't know. I guess to me, it kind of has like a little like professional look or something, you know, versus if we had this seam, it's a little hard to see the seam because of the purl bumps, but the seam would be really noticeable had we done that on the outside, where on the outside now we just have this nice little line that just looks really, really great. Okay, so I only have this itty bitty tiny piece of fabric, but what you would have is obviously a big piece of fabric that has the bottom is open. And then at this point, well, you would weave in your ends. I guess you don't, if you weave in your ends or not, that's really up to you. I would say weave in your ends for 2 reasons. 1, you don't want one to come out. And 2, you, depending on your colors, you might be able to see them. So actually, let's just weave in one of these. I'll show you what I did here. Oh, Linda says beautiful. I'm so glad you like that. I'm so glad you like how I finished that up. So when you're weaving in the ends, especially when you're working in your color B and color C, you can just weave in your ends however you like to weave in your ends, but I try to stick the light colors with like colors. So here I have color C. So I'm trying to basically just weave in my end along where I have some color C. I don't go down into the color A really. And again, this is going to a little bit depend on the colors you're using to how much you care about your ends and things like that. But I do like to just try to weave in the end. I just do it like this, sort of back and forth along my color C. And you would have a little bit more here because I only did 2 rounds with my color C, but you would have 3. And so you would just do that for all of your rounds. But then let's talk about our mattress stitch. So at this point, you would have your whole piece of fabric, and now you're going to put your pillow in. And one thing I would really recommend is make sure that you're poking the corner of this out a little bit. You could even use like your knitting needle, or even really just your finger in this case is fine. Because once, especially if you do seam it and you're not going to put a zipper in, you know, you want this to be sticking out. It could be a little bit to shape this after your pillow's in. So now you're going to stick your pillow in the hole, and then we're going to seam it up. So I'm just going to shove all my ends in here for now. Okay. So we're going to do the mattress stitch, and we're going to do the mattress stitch with the right sides facing. And I'm actually going to cut a different color of yarn just so you can see, I think, a little bit better what I'm going to be doing. But you would just use your color A yarn, or if you left a really long tail at the beginning of your project, then you wouldn't even have to attach a new piece of yarn. So, oh, my yarn's attached to my other little swatch here. Okay, here we go. All right. And I'm just going to go, probably just need something maybe 3 times the length to be safe. Okay. So to start off, because I'm attaching a new piece of yarn, we need to actually attach this. And again, since we're going to be closing up this hole, I'm just going to start at one end. It doesn't, again, if you're not using your actual tail, it really doesn't matter which end you start at. And again, I'm using the contrasting color yarn here. I want to make sure that that's clear. So basically all I do is I just loop the new color, or the new strand in this case, this other color, and all these ends would be woven in. So it would be a little bit neater. And then you would just weave in this end. Now you just have this end. Okay. So when I did this, I had the pillow in and it did kind of stretch over the pillow. So what I found to be helpful was I just took some of these locking stitch markers. If you do have something like a safety pin, that could work too. I don't like to use safety pins with my knitting because I've used them before and then the coils get stuck on the knitting and kind of snag. So I have tons of these locking stitch markers. And so when the pillow is in there, then I just stuck one at approximately the middle and then split that in half. And that just helped me keep my place a little bit as I was working. And it also, because this is stockinette stitch, you can see it rolls naturally. And so that also kept it from like rolling so much while I was trying to do the mattress stitch. So now to do the mattress stitch, to start out this, again, it's a little fiddly when you first start, but then it's not so bad. All we're going to do is go under 2 strands on one side and pull the yarn through. And then on the other side, we're going to go under 2 strands. And you want to try to match up so that you're going directly across. But again, this is the bottom of your pillow. It's pretty forgiving. And so now where we came out of that one, we're just going to go to the next one. And the thing that's really great about mattress stitch here is that you don't have to pull it completely tight right away. You can leave it a little bit loose like I'm doing here, especially as you're getting started because it is a little fiddly. And then we'll be able to pull the seam closed. And again, we have a video on mattress stitch specifically and shows you exactly how to do this and exactly how to do it if you're doing it along a cast on or bind off edge like I'm doing here. So once I get a few stitches in, look, if I just pull, see how that just came right together. And again, then your pillow is going to be in here, but then I would just take your finger or you could take a crochet hook, your tapestry needle, and just make sure you're popping out that little corner. And again, I'm using the contrasting color here, but you can see even with the contrasting color, you can almost barely see it. So let's just do a few more. Again, you're just going under 2 strands, just like that on one side, pulling the yarn through, going to the other side, under 2 strands, pulling the yarn through. And don't let this mattress stitch scare you. I was honestly kind of scared of mattress stitch for a long time. I don't know why. I just thought it seemed hard, but it's seamed and it's a seam. But it's really not that hard. It's just you're going under the 2 strands, just like that. And it does make a really nice seam. And then again, if we just pull, that's it. And so you would just keep doing that all the way down to the end. Now, when you get to the end, now your pillow is completely closed. So what do you do with this, right? So all I did, let's just pretend that this is all the way closed. And again, it'll be in the same color. I just take a few stitches. And again, yours won't be noticeable because it's going to be in the same color as your color A. I just came down a few stitches. You'll just come down a few stitches this way and you can come up a few stitches this way. And then ultimately I did it just like when I'm doing a toy. I just bring it through like this. Then we'll take our needle off. And then I just kind of pull on the fabric a little bit and then cut, give it a pull, and then the end will just get sort of sucked right back into there. And there you go. That's really it. And so at the end, you're left with this amazing pillow that you can put on your bed, put on your stitching chair, wherever you want. And it turns out really, really nice. And it's a really easy project. I think, it'll look so good in so many different colors. I think that it would look really cool if you did these in maybe like even a variegated yarn. It's one that's really great for leftovers, especially for these little stripes. There's so many different things that you can do with this. And I know that all of you are really going to enjoy knitting this. And I really hope that you do share your project with us if you do make it, because I would love to see it. And Ellen says, it's so inspiring to watch this. Thank you. Well, thank you, Ellen. I'm so glad that you're able to watch. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining me today. And once again, if you haven't already downloaded the pattern, make sure that you do so and tag us on social media if you do make one. And thanks so much for joining us today. Happy knitting, and I will see you next time. Bye.